Hello, viewers and listeners. Welcome to episode 4 of Unacknowledged and Unknown. Today we have a special guest with us, a very serious Bigfoot investigator and researcher. His name is Zeus Platt. Hopefully I pronounced your name right, Zeus.
Yep.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Welcome to Unacknowledged and Unknown. And Zeus has his own channel on YouTube called Project Sasquatch. And I'll drop the link in the description below this video. And that way you guys can access his information, his videos, and his content. And if you have your own YouTube account, you can comment on his forays into the wilderness areas in Colorado. He does his research in the Colorado Rockies. I won't give any specific locations. That's up to him to decide. And so, how are you today, Zeus?
Oh, I'm pretty good. How about yourself? It's awesome to be here.
I'm doing great. I'm great. As long as I have my glass of tea here, I can last for hours. So I guess I'll start out with you explaining to the viewers out there what got you initially interested in doing in the field research and trying to discover what was going on regarding Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and why you're still doing this to this day.
It all started for me 33, 34 years ago, up in Gateway, Colorado. I grew up in a homestead log cabin, a dirt floor. It was just the cabin was very, very old. My dad had to fix the roof on it. It had no electricity or anything, I'm not going to complain about it because that was some of the best years of my life. I'd go back to it in a heartbeat if I could. But we did a lot of hunting. Our grocery list was out there in the woods, and my dad always mentioned Sasquatch. He didn't say it in a way where he was trying to frighten me about it. I remember when he would mention it when I was young, and it kind of most of the time went over my head. I was just too busy, playing, fishing in the creeks and ditches, looking for crawdads, getting dirty. So, but then one night, we were all going on like a little camping trip. We were gonna go stay up above Gateway there, and there's a little mountain range up there, and we were in an old Suburban. I can't exactly remember the year of it, but I know it's an old Suburban, big four-door Suburban, and we were cruising up to our location, and out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, good luck seeing anybody. And if it wasn't for my dad's and mom and dad's friends coming up the next morning, we probably wouldn't have seen anybody for a week. We would have to walk out of there. But so the Suburban broke down, and we ended up having to stay the night in the Suburban right there on the side of the road. We knew the guys were coming up the next day, so we'd get help from them. Turned out it was a fuel pump, the old fuel pumps that I don't know what you call that. It's got the little rocker arm in it, and it sticks into the engine, and as the engine turns, it smacks that arm and it pumps the fuel.
It's a gear operated fuel pump. Yeah, those don't you see those? You don't see those anymore.
Yeah, and well, that night, everybody fell asleep, and how when you're when you're laying there and maybe your dog is licking your shoulder, and you get to that point where you're not sure if you're dreaming or if it's real until you fully wake up and you're like, oh, it's real. I was laying there, and I think my sister was there, and my mom was in the passenger seat. My dad was driving. They had the seats kind of kicked back, and we were all sleeping. I could have swore I felt I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or not, but I could feel. I just remember the Suburban was rocking like I was on a boat, and I just remember I'd wake up. I woke up, and sure enough, I felt the end of a rock, And well, when I looked up, I see this figure standing there. Eyes were glowing red, looking right at me, and then scared the hell out of me. So I sat up and I looked around. I looked over here just above my head where I was sleeping, and there was a little tiny one that just looking just over the to the window at me. His little eyes were glowing, and there was like a medium one standing right next to the little one looking in at me. And I remember yelling and not really screaming, but yelling, and I kind of started crying, because it scared the shit out of me. I don't know what the hell it was. My dad woke up and he pulled out his 357, and I told him, like, I said, I just seen something out here staring at us in the windows. And I do remember though when I yelled when I woke up and I was scared, and I do remember they didn't just turn away. They just didn't turn and just take straight off. They just smoothly just below the window, and I didn't see him again. Like
They
the little
ducked
one,
down.
the little one just went like this. The two bigger ones, the one was real big on the east side of the window, the big window there, and he just went down like this. The other ones, these two went down like this. Well, the little one just went straight down, and the other one that was next to the little one went down the same way. And that was the end of that, and got quiet. I was able to fall back asleep, and everybody passed out. And this was probably about 2 in the morning, if I remember right, 1 or 2 in the morning. And then the next day, I think I woke up at like 9 o'clock, and the guys were outside the Suburban standing there. I think they'd done fixed the vehicle, and I remember getting out. They were standing there around those footprints. They left footprints in the powdery dirt road. The dirt road was, I think that the ground was almost like a clayish type stuff or something in it,
Hmm.
real fine powder dirt, and there was all these footprints leading away and then dropping down back off the road. And I remember the guys and my dad and everybody up there looking at it, talking about it. I heard them say Sasquatch several times, and ever since then I've been really infatuated and wanting to know what the hell those things are, because to that point all I've ever seen was elk, deer, bear, lions, the fish in the creek, your typical wildlife. And ever since that I've said, what the hell are these things? And throughout the years I didn't really get into researching it too much, but throughout the years I've seen more while we were out
How
hunting
old
and
were,
stuff.
how old were you when you had that experience in your parents' Suburban?
uh I want to say 11 or 12, 10, 11 or 12, somewhere in there, because I wasn't a teenager yet.
So you're trying to figure out where this whatever you saw fit into all the known animals that you were familiar with
Mhm.
out in the
My,
forest and the
my
wilderness.
my dad knew what I seen. He just wasn't going to go off and scare me in the situation.
Parents do that.
He just kind of shrugged his shoulders. We're fine, don't worry about it, And I after that I knew what my dad would always talk about. And my mom would always after that would always tell me uh, that they go into another dimension. And for
Okay.
the longest time growing up, I didn't really believe her. I'm like, how's that possible? And I mean, I kind of, and then later on in life, later on, because I seen at least 6 or 7 Sasquatch disappear before my eyes. I don't know. Some of the viewers probably don't believe it, but it is what it is. I seen it. And each one of those Sasquatch made a quick movement and took off very fast. And it wasn't like they just were there and then just disappeared, gone. It wasn't like that. When they took off, it's like reality, where you're looking, reality unzipped, and they went into like a pocket. Strangest shit I've ever seen. And it wasn't straight when it went through. It's hard to explain. It was feathery,
All right.
and when it went through, the Sasquatch was just like,
Yeah, and I always wondered about that too. I mean, I mean, you wonder when you listen to uh the stories from Native indigenous people, they talk about, depending on what nation or tribe that is talking about this, they always say that Bigfoot or Sasquatch, they walk between two worlds. I hear that a lot, and then I even had my Native American friend told me he believes it's a physical flesh and blood creature, but he came to the conclusion that their movements are so fast, and that human beings in general, the majority of us, if not all of us, are very poor eyewitnesses. We don't observe correctly. We don't understand how to observe things. So when we see that disappearing act they pull, he came to the conclusion they're moving so fast, whether they drop down to spider crawl position or on their stomach or whatever, he says it's very easy to say they've disappeared. That there's that, I've witnessed what I would say is a pixelization, where I've seen movements and their vocalizations, and then actually look and watch where the area in front of the foliage of trees where I see this movement, the foliage become pixelated, like there's something in front of it obscuring my view, but I could sort of see through it. And I never quite understood what I was looking at. So I can't say as a factor without any way of proving it. I don't have the evidence to prove that they're disappearing or they're going into another dimension, any more than I can say they aren't. All I can really say is I don't know at this point. And I caution people who are selling this, and these are more people that just because they listen to other people and they don't witness it themselves, just from listening to other people that are submitting videos or doing research, they hear what you say and they'll say, oh, I believe 100% that they go in and out of dimensions based on what you said. And if you listen carefully, what you just said, you're not saying that. You're saying what you witnessed is this feathery sort of thing that opens up and they just sort of, and so again, that's right. That is what you're witnessing, but what does that tell you? It's not to go and try to examine that and say, well, this tells me absolutely this. It doesn't really tell you much of anything other than you witnessed it and you can't explain it. And that's how I look at it. I see
absolutely no way of proving it.
No way of proving it. Yeah, and you've got your memory of that, and that's and so you have to go from there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so have you what do you like about doing the research in the field and going out? I've seen your channel. I've been binge watched some of your videos just to sort of get an idea of what you're doing, if I can sort of compare it to what I'm doing, and I'd say 100% it explains that I'm just not seeing things, that there's other people witnessing the structures, the evidence, the footprints, the vocalizations, and all the other stuff that goes along with that. So what do you what compels you to continue doing what you do?
Knowledge and educating others. A lot of knowledge for myself, because I want to figure out them. I don't want to harm them. I don't want to interfere. I mean, a lot of people say just by me going out there in the woods, I'm interfering in their life, and that's not true. Interfering in their life is going out there, chopping down trees, being noisy, being rowdy,
Hunting them down,
maybe popping rounds off into the forest, being kind of disrespectful, you know. And although I'm a gun guy, you know, I'm very responsible. But it's a pursuit of knowledge and the truth, because man, these guys are out there, and there's a lot of other shit out there too.
Yes.
I mean, I've also seen Dogman, and every time I've seen each one of these things, because I spend a lot of time out in the woods, I'd like to get out there, peace and quiet, and just being out in the woods away from people. That's another aspect of it, just getting out and away from everybody, you know. And then the other aspect is looking for them. Sometimes it's a scary situation, and other times it's, you know, it's a good peaceful, you know, situation. And I want to learn more about them. You know, most of all, I want to know where they came from. I have an idea. I think they've been here for a very long time. Other people have said that they're extraterrestrials. They're not originated from this planet. I'm not going to tell them they're full of shit, because it's all possible. We don't know definitively.
We don't know. Yeah.
You know, because if you tell somebody that says that, oh shit, you don't know what you're talking about, blah 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 blah. That's like telling somebody, a guy that knows, you know, about an elk bugle. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. That ain't no elk. You know, that's kind of like the same kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just don't know, so don't sit there when somebody explains something. There's an incredible amount of stuff that your head can't get wrapped around. Even me, as open-minded as I am, I see stuff that I can't wrap my head around. I have a lot of stuff that people tell me. I don't discredit them or in any way, shape, or form. I'd be like, that's very damn interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't doubt it. The kind of stuff that happens out there in those woods is it's insanity. But I just want to learn the truth about the Sasquatch, and the little people, the Dogman, the werewolf dudes, the lizard things.
The lizard people.
Yeah, lizard people, and you know, these little troll things. And you know, I haven't seen the fairies, the little flying fairy peoples. I've seen some videos that people are saying were fake, but I looked at you know, watched them and looked at them like crazy, just that they were fake.
Mm-hmm.
If they are fake, it's like whatever, but these look pretty darn real. There's a reason why, like, the ancient people, you know, Vikings, barbarians, and the old, back in the day, people, old natives would mention trolls, gnomes, have a name for all these creatures.
They had a list of them. They had the brownies, the elves, the fairies, and they were all distinctly different.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, I always look at it, if people are telling me this, and I go, you know what, that may be mostly based on what they've read, and again, it comes out as their opinion. But until I can prove it does exist or it doesn't exist, I have to sort of just say, I'm going to have to learn. And I'm just going to have to sort of say, at this point, I don't know, but that doesn't invalidate what they had decided to believe or what their opinion is. I just, you know, I have to look at it. I have to question everything. And that's sort of what you're doing. You're questioning it all, going, you know, what if? So I just can't dismiss it and say out of hand, I haven't seen a fairy, so therefore they must not exist. I can't really look at the world, because I look at it. I just read a report the other day regarding just the ocean, the waters that cover the earth. 2/3 of the earth is covered by water. And they said I read in this report, there are 25, it was either 25 million or 250 million species that are still undiscovered in the water. They're not just talking about the ocean, they're talking about in fresh water too. And then they went on to say there are another X about a million, so many million species living on the land masses that people, human beings, scientists still have not discovered. If you look back in history, you look at the okapi from Africa, the coelacanth, the fish that they said was extinct, was a fossil, and they're bringing up these in the Mariana Trench, discovering these species of deep marine creatures that there were only legends and stories about from the old seafarers from back in the ancient times. And so even with our advanced science nowadays, we only know of the cataloged species of sea creatures and land animals that we've discovered, which is a small percentage still to this day. And we're not talking about the Amazon basin. or the Congo rainforest. We're talking about the entire world. All the mountains. If you fly over the Northwest or parts of Okefenokee Swamp, or even Colorado, and you see how much, even the areas that are being deforested and reseeded, how much of that area is still unexplored.
Yeah. And might I add, those areas where they take out trees, like right up here in Twin Sisters area, they've logged out a big section. Although logging's not allowed in this area anymore, you can't really hunt on a lot of all these areas. But when they take out and they clear cut an area like that, they just made a prime spot for Sasquatch. They love that shit.
Oh yeah,
Sasquatch love that. I don't know what it is about it. Big
well,
meadows.
I have a theory based on what one of the guys in the Erickson project talked about it, and it made total sense to me. When you go in and you deforest a section of whether it's in Wisconsin or Michigan or Colorado or Oregon or Washington, when you go in and you just deforest a tract of land, let's say a 40 by 40 acre section, what happens? All the vegetation and undergrowth just flourishes because now the sun can reach it. What does that do? It creates a forage for all the ungulates, all the deer, the elk, all the other animals that just are, it's a magnet for all these deer and elk. Well, what's the attractant there for Bigfoot, if you think about it? Yeah. You know, if I was a Bigfoot, and I see it here during the fall and spring especially, and then in the summer. When nightfall comes in the summertime and even in the spring and fall, all the deer and all the other critters come out into the grasslands, the prairies, and they're coming into the areas that there is no forest. And you see them, you really see them right at sunset all the way till sunup in the morning, and they all sort of recede back into the forest until the next dusk or dawn.
Yeah.
So I thought if you're clear cutting, you're creating this incredible explosion of growth of vegetation. And that's like a magnet for all these elk and deer and all these other critters. And I thought, yeah, if I'm an alpha predator, that's where I'm going to concentrate my hunting. That's where I'm going to. So it makes total sense to me.
You could see.
Oh yeah.
The mind of a Sasquatch is very tactical, militaristic. The way they act and the way they do things, it's incredible in what they do. And those little clear cut areas right there. I've been out in the middle of those standing there, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm being watched. Don't know if I am or not. Boy, I could feel it though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a sense
of that. Like, I've got to get to the tree line, man. I'm just so uncomfortable standing out here right now. I got to get into that tree line and get some cover because, man, I feel like a sore thumb.
You know that feeling you're talking about? I get that too. Even when I'm in a crowd of people, if I'm in a mall, and I'm in a crowd of people, and you get that feeling on the back of your neck, like you're being watched, and you turn around, and sure enough, somebody's got eyes on you from behind you. It might be 10, 20 people back, and they're looking at you like maybe they know you, or maybe you look like a member of their family, because I've made the mistake of looking at the back of somebody's head and thinking it's my wife. Hey, Becky. And somebody turns around, and she's like, I'm not your wife.
Or just funny looking like me. Hi.
That's a feeling I get when I'm out in the field sometime. I feel like in the back, the hairs on the back of my neck start to stand up. And it's the same feeling. I feel like I'm being watched. Only this time I'm not in a crowd of people. And I know there's no other person out in this forest with me because I parked in a parking lot. One area I go to, the parking lot can fit more than like 4 cars. And when I go in, I'm the only one going in. When I come out, there's nobody else out there in the parking lot. So when I'm in there and I get that feeling I'm being watched, I pay attention to that gut feeling, or whatever you want to call it, that sixth sense. I pay attention to that because I think we, as people, it's part of something that's over generations, probably thousands and tens of thousands of years, we genetically have that survival instinct as part of our genetic memory. and it's been passed on from generation to generation. So it sort of allows you, when you have that feeling, it's making you aware or alert that you're being watched, and potentially you may be being watched because maybe you're the mountain lion's next meal. You know, and I had a friend of mine tell me that. He says he had a feeling he was being watched, just had the sneaking suspicion, and he was on the along the edge of the river walking, and they have these tall reed beds along the river that are taller, 8, 9, 10 feet tall reed beds, thick. And he said something compelled him. He just got a feeling to turn around real quick and look behind him. And as he turned around to look behind him, I think he said 60 or 70 feet behind him, he could see where the reed beds were separated, and there was a head there of a mountain lion, a cougar, watching him from behind. He said he felt it. He just felt it. He had compelled to turn around, and there it was, looking at him. It was stalking him. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying makes sense, and I'm sure there's nothing wrong with using that to be aware that you might be not alone.
Yeah, I get a lot of the Sasquatch stuff, because I got a lot of people that tell me, you know, if you look at my videos, a majority of my videos, there's shit, and you can see it sitting there staring at me, and it's not pareidolia. And I'm gonna say a little over a month ago, we'll call it Johnny's area up here, and I was back in there, and I was just investigating, checking out a new area. I've never really investigated back in there, and got up into this one section, and the road will come around like this little 4-wheel drive road out in the middle of nowhere. Comes around and it heads back out that way. And I stopped right here. I walked down in there a little bit. I didn't have my equipment with me. It's in the car. I'm just scouting. I walked down in there and I had my little corgi with me, and right away he took off and he ran all the way back to the car. And I was getting hit with not entirely a bad feeling. I was getting hit with something, and looking down in there, I was like, okay, well, I'm getting feelings. I mean, I find a lot of them just I get hit with feelings. I jumped back, went back up, got back in the car, told my wife, I said, some stuff going on down there. I could feel it. Gus didn't like it either. He ran away, came back to you. And that's the day that I got 3 Sasquatch down in this area, because I stopped. I seen this giant X on the side of the road. Instantly, I said, this is the spot. This has got to be it right here. Mm-hmm. I jumped out. I started seeing all kinds of evidence and breaks and different stuff that's manipulated, not by nature, not by wind, not by snowfall, not by Boy Scouts, mm-hmm. not by Girl Scouts. They were manipulated, and by all means, not by machines. But anyways, I'd walked down in there, and there's this really nice bend, and it was stuck down into the ground. And a lot of these bends, they make them in different ways. I don't really have too much explanation. There's symbolism to them, how they do that. It means something. Yeah. But the bend came around like this, and there was a log laying on the back side of the bend where the base comes up and around. Right. And other times you'll find it laying over here. And usually when you find a log laying on the front side, kind of positioned nicely, right next to that, you'll see a tree cracked, pointing right at it. And it's like, that's so weird. So this one was the one laying on the back side of the bend. And I was filming it and looking back, and there's 3 Sasquatch, one sitting there from here up, and another one, the little taller one, because the Sasquatch around here aren't monsters. Yeah, there's been some monsters come through here. You know, people.
They're not of incredible size. You're talking what, 7, 8 feet maybe, or
90% of them, they're only 5 to 6 to 7 foot tall. Yeah. They're really short, and like the silverback gorilla looking fellows that I've seen up here, they were only like, I was taller than they were, and they look like half man, half silverback, glowing wide eyes during the day. But these guys back over here in Johnny's area, they all started walking this way from me, and then the other one is just this hairy hominid looking guys, you know, and he got up and he was kind of hunched down and he was swooshing the brush, walking away from me, you know, and then after that, I had went back up to the vehicle. I was only 50 yards from the road in the vehicle, and jumped in the vehicle, did the Austin Powers turnaround, you know,
Yeah, fragile.
and I got this heavy smell of sulfur for a minute.
Yeah.
And a couple of people told me, well, usually when they open up that little dimension that they, you know, and they go play their disappearing act, you smell these crazy smells. And it's my knowledge, when you smell like that heavy sulfur, that's means there's a demon.
Right. I mean, there's a religious context to that.
Yeah, and I don't 100% say it is, and I don't disbelieve it. Like I said, something made that smell, a really heavy smell of sulfur. When I got back into the vehicle, I started heading back. I don't know why it smelled like that, but it made me feel a little uncomfortable remembering what people had said.
Right.
But then on the other hand, I get to thinking, well, maybe it's just it's like what they said, you know, they go into this dimension, and when they crack that reality, it releases this nasty
I mean, people that are into demonology, and you know, if you watch enough of the ghost hunter shows on TV, they talk about that sulfur smell. It's like demon came from whatever, another dimension, the pit, you know, the pit of hell, and that's the sulfur of, you know, the burning inferno of hell. What I came from more of a different aspect, which sort of made sense to me, looking into natural insect repellents among indigenous people all over the world. Strangely enough, one of the things that repel insects is sulfur. In fact, if you go to sulfur drips or where it's leached out of the ground in canyons, drips off of bases of hills or mountains, where you have sulfur oxide and sulfur content in the rock or the ore, and you have what they call a drip or a spring. That water, in fact, I grew up in a spot in the country where all our water, we had a well that at some point, as a well got depleted, got into a layer of that sulfur, and we called it sulfur water. It smelled like rotten eggs, but you could tell the sulfur smell. So we would have to fill up gallon jugs of water and put them in our refrigerator. And then after about 24 hours, all that sulfur would leach out to the bottom, and we'd see the black, sort of what precipitated out was a black layer of the sulfur on the bottom of the gallon jug. And then we could pour it out, and that would be left behind, and then the water didn't have the smell anymore. But I remember growing up in that house, and me and my sisters, we hated the sulfur water. You couldn't drink. You could drink then, back in the day, you could drink water out of the tap, and it was pretty clear. It was pretty until now, where you got to filter everything. But I learned about sulfur. You can actually apply it like an insect repellent, just like you do some certain types of sage. You can apply, and it sort of repels insects. But I always thought, is Bigfoot, you know, they're sort of masters of the wilderness areas they live in. Why wouldn't they, if they were constantly being bugged by insects, I could see them using this as a repellent. God knows all the other plants and herbs and medicinal plants that we're unaware of that they use. I mean, they're applying a lot. You know, I've had people tell me that you know, I had my one Native American friend. He goes, he was into the 12 pole and the 18 pole teepees. It was part of his something he learned from his parents and his grandparents. And he mentioned the original people one day, and I was asking, what do you mean by the original people, the first people? But he said, well, I think we were referring to Bigfoot. And he says, I said, what about these structures? I says, I see these teepee-like structures, especially more out west in the alpine forest, and I do here in Illinois. We have structures here in the deciduous forest. I don't run across. We have occasional teepees and half teepees, but we see a lot more what I call backbone structures and what I call lean-to type structures, where sticks are leaned against a big down tree, and it creates an opening underneath where you can actually break up your outline, or it's really not protecting you from the weather really that much. But I asked him, I says, where did you guys come up with the idea in your culture for the 18 pole or 12 pole teepee, where you're using these lodge pole pines? And he goes, well, he says, where do you think we got it from? He says, he believes that his culture got it from Bigfoot. And I can't say no or yes. All I can say is, that's a possibility. Because when I see some of the structures in your videos and other people videos that are very similar, and you're going, there's no way people can pick up these huge, we're not talking about lodgepole pines anymore. We're talking about these huge fir, delimbed fir trees and pines that are, 30-foot long and leaned up against each other. I don't see a football team of people doing this.
Yeah, I was accused of well, not really accused, but people have gotten on there, and I've got these really big X's and some stuff, and I said, well, obviously an excavator went out there and did that. You can't get an excavator, and they're not going to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to cut down and tread and make a road to that area just to make these X's, and then go out and then somehow put the trees back into place.
Yeah, where there's no access road. Yeah,
nobody would ever see it unless it's like somebody like me that walked off trail and investigates these things. And I come up on something like that, and that very same day that there was a hair I got on my shoe, long black hair. It ended up on my shoe, and I still got it. I want to get it under a microscope and stuff like that. I haven't figured that out yet, but got a couple of suspicious hairs that I found out there that didn't match any known local animal. But if
they're lacking a medulla, which is the center part of the hair, the medulla. If it doesn't have a medulla, there's only a few animals like polar bears and other animals that lack a medulla. And I found out also fair-haired people that are blonde-haired people that are very fair complected, their hairs lack a medulla. Now my hair doesn't. Most people have. If you look at a hair under a microscope, there will be a center tube in the center part of that hair, and that tube is filled with cells. That's the medulla. Bigfoot, you don't have to ask Melba Ketchum. There's a lot of people that are expert hair analysts that can look at hair and say, yeah, human hair, the majority of human hair, we have a medulla in our hair. Bigfoot, for whatever reason, they lack that medulla. So if you ever look at your hair under a microscope, you'll see it immediately. It'll be hollow. And that's why you can't really draw DNA from it unless it has that little root attached, that little cellular root. Like if you ever pull your hair out, sometimes you'll get that little clump of flesh at the very end of it. But not Bigfoot. Their hairs are like tapered. Like our hair, if you ever look at hair of human beings, you can tell it's been cut. And it'll have a distinct terminated end where it's been cut. Unless you're a wild man living in the forest and you never cut your hair, that's how Bigfoot hair tapers to the end. Yeah. It's like a natural, Yeah. So, and I always wondered too about, even here in Illinois, though they have seen really big ones, the ones that I've witnessed, except for one, I want to say was closer to 8 to 8.5 feet tall, which I considered fairly big.
Yeah.
I have talked to people that I do research with, and based on what I've seen, I haven't seen anything that's, 11, 12 feet, 10 feet. I haven't seen anything, and not saying they're not out here, but the ones I've witnessed on night vision, or I should say thermal, seemed shorter than that. In fact, I saw one with my naked eye that was probably no taller than me. Walk within 12 feet. Well, I was right next to my friend. It was 12 feet off his shoulder, and he was like 2 feet from me. So it would have been about 14 feet from me. but I happened to look, it was nighttime, and I looked and it walked right by, just like a person walking right by silently. And I made the comment, I go, I don't believe what I just saw. And he goes, what'd you just say? I said, one just walked right past you. And I didn't have my thermal. I didn't have, night vision. I was just with my own two eyes, it just walked right by. And I'm about 5'9", and this thing couldn't have been more than 5'10", maybe. But it was bulky, like a football player. It was thick from front to back. Like if you look at the thickness or girth of it from its chest to its back, it was thick. And it was like, boy, I wouldn't want to wrestle that thing.
No.
It would no way I could have, but it was just walked right by. Almost like it was like trying to almost reminded me of like what teenagers do. Hey, let's see how close we can get without being spotted. It gave me that impression. Like it was just like, and then that whole night, nonstop throwing sticks and rocks at us, nonstop. This went on for hours. Just to get a react. Initially, they were getting a reaction like, oh, hey, just threw something. Up there it is again. Pretty soon, we just stopped talking about it. And then eventually, they stopped throwing stuff. This wasn't like an attempt to like get us to leave. It was like they were just having fun. It was sort of entertainment, maybe, or whatever you want to call it. They had to do something, and they figured they were going to indulge themselves by throwing stuff at us. And then after a while, it was like they got tired of it, and then they stopped throwing. This went on for hours. And I thought, I've heard of people being boulders or soccer ball size boulders being thrown at people. This wasn't that at all. If that would have happened, we probably would have got the idea, hey, we're not wanted, we better leave. It wasn't that at all. It was like, it'd remind me of something kids do, our own kids would do. So I wasn't afraid. It was more lighthearted. And who are these two guys sitting out in the middle of the forest? And we're going to bug them. Yeah. That sort of attitude. And if you want, I don't even know if calling it bluff charge is even an accurate term, but I've been charged at, and then just stopped shy of me able to see other than a shadow. I couldn't see what it was. That was almost like an intimidation, like, hey, we don't want you here. We don't want you following us. Because I was tracking them. And that one particular day, I was tracking them. I was following all the sign, all the stick language. And I got to a point where they had dropped back to a point where they were like, okay, this is as far as we're going to drop back. And they were like tired of it. Yeah. And I just, they charged, and it was like something crashing through the trees. I expected to see a rhinoceros come out of the trees. It was huge. We don't have elk here in Illinois. So I'm thinking that was not a deer. I don't know. And at that point, I got the impression, you know what, maybe I should leave. And I left. I was like, I'm going to be smart about this. I'm not going to badger. So at that point, so have you ever had anything like that occur? Oh, now that I'm on the subject, I did see one of your videos where you went down a trail and you saw off to, I believe it was your left or off to one side of the trail, something that, I don't know if you caught it on film, but you saw it near a tree. I think it was a Bigfoot. You weren't sure, but when you came back later, it was not there. And you described in the video that you thought you had a Bigfoot there, but for whatever reason, your mind didn't like alert you to the fact it was sitting off trail. And when you returned back, whatever was there was not there. I do remember that video of yours. You came to the conclusion that you looked at it and your mind just said, oh, that's just a stump. And then when you came back, the stump was gone. But it was something along those lines. It was a video I watched, and you did mention that something was there on your first trip in. And then when you returned back, it was gone. And you talked about that in your video. And I thought that was very convincing to me. That told me that you had come across, if not them, something else.
Trying to remember what when it was. It's been a few times, even off video, that I was walking along and I glance and I see.
And your dog was with you. Your dog was with you at that time, and your dog had reacted funny. I don't know if it like alerted or, but yeah, I saw that video and I was like, you came back to compare what you had seen. I don't know if you actually filmed it, but you were able to prove it, and I believe on your second trip in with your camera and show it and say, yes, right here, this was here, but now it's not here. And I think, I don't know when you returned, whether it was days later. The impression I got is you returned days later and it was strangely whatever you had witnessed there before was now missing.
I'm trying to remember. I got so much, trying to remember what day that was. You gotta excuse me if I don't remember.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm the same way. You got so much content, you can't remember everything. And
I'd have to like go back and like, if I seen the first part of the video, I'd be like, oh, okay, I remember now.
You were getting a funny feeling too. When you went down it the first time and this thing was off trail, you had a feeling like, I think in the video you kept saying, I feel strange. I feel like they're right there. And you were getting a feeling like they were putting out a feeling towards you, or like almost like a feeling like it was heavy. It was a heavy feeling, and you felt like you were just not comfortable. And then at some point you left, and then when you returned, the feeling was gone, and the thing that you had witnessed that was off trail was now not there. And you never addressed it in your first trip in. It was almost like you were like, man, I feel heavy. I feel like I really don't feel like I'm comfortable being here. And then you left and you had your dog with you, and your dog was acting funny too. But I remember that sort of stood out because I was watching a few of your videos that day, and you make them easy to watch. You don't have like hours of video where you have to like skip ahead to find out where the meat and potatoes is.
Yeah.
Usually your videos are short and it's all, if it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes, it's all meat and potatoes. It's the whole thing is meat and potatoes. So
yeah, I try not to bore everybody too much. A lot of people actually like it if I kept the camera running and I put over an hour worth of video, and maybe some of it's just just of the woods of me walking around or whatever. And I feel like I bore the crap out of people. I
do.
I try to get the the decent good sections in. I try to get down to the point. I try to remember what.
Yeah, that was one of the ones I saw. I think it was over a year ago, year and a half ago. I'd been watching your channel long before. Yeah, when you were Western Slope Bigfoot, and I thought you have a feeling when you watch somebody's video, you go, boy, this guy's under the radar. He's like has incredible information and nobody knows about him. And that's how, when I watch your videos, I go, people need to watch his stuff and maybe learn how to do, boots on the ground, as they always say, research in the field, how to do actual investigations, because you sort of do it, whether it's naturally or you're just sort of focused on how to do it. But I thought, man, this is, he's under the radar, sort of like the unsung hero thing. It's like nobody knows about him. He's like out there, nobody's aware that he's out there. And I was like, I don't know how I came across it. It was a suggested video. But yet when you search in the early days before you changed your channel name, when you searched your channel name, nothing would come up. You were buried on page 30, on the YouTube search query. And I was like, so I was lucky to find your channel. And I thought, man, some of the stuff he's finding is similar to the handful of other channels that I watch. The rest of the stuff I don't even watch anymore because it's boring and it's the same crap over and over again. It's all filler. And it's my stuff I think is boring, but I have people tell me it's not. But I think you're more self-critical. When you're watching your own stuff, you're going.
I've seen your videos. I think they're great. You show footprints, and you show. I think you show some good stuff. I've subscribed to you I'll sit down. I keep an eye out for any new stuff.
Yeah, and I do too. I try to stay ahead, on the edge of what's coming up new and stuff that you might reveal that you didn't have in your previous videos, because you never know what's going to happen. Just like this video I'm talking about. I said, man, I've had that feeling. I've been out there, and I know if I would have examined the footage from that first foray in, I'd see things that probably on my return weren't there. But that's how you described it, and I was like,
Did
I
I
had that.
did I mention the what I thought was something, and then I came back and looked again, and it was
You
gone?
basically described what you thought was a Bigfoot sitting at a location next or near a tree, or maybe gave you the impression it was a stump. But when you went by your first time, you said you looked at it. I don't know if you pointed the camera at it, but you looked at it, and you said for the life of you later on, you could not understand why your mind convinced you it was a stump, that you realized later that it was not a stump, that it was Bigfoot. Somehow, like you had been fooled. Like it was like you got the impression like, oh, just move along, nothing to see here. And that's how you showed the video. And then when you came back, you're going, it was right there, and it's not there anymore. And you said that, and then a heavy feeling was gone too. You said you didn't have that feeling of like heaviness or like you weren't wanted there. And I thought, there's times when I go into my areas, I feel like, oh, this is like beautiful, and I love it, and nature is so welcoming, and I just want to walk around and look at the trees and really enjoy it. And then there are other times I'll go to the same location, and I'll feel like, boy, I don't feel like I need to be here. Something, yeah, I get that feeling, and I can't until you go out there yourself, to people that watch your stuff and experience that. It's hard to describe. But you did. I thought in that video you described it pretty well. I understood it because I've run into that feeling, and I was like, is that sixth sense again? Sort of work. I think we all have the capability. We're all sort of got that sixth sense. We just, some people listen to it, and some others don't. I notice when I listen to it, I avoid fights. I avoid getting shot. I, but if I don't listen to it, I get into trouble. This has been my own experience from my own, growing up from a young man to being a senior now. But I've always felt that, yeah, your gut reaction sometimes is right 100% of the time. If I go by my gut, usually I survive.
I've said that. I think I've said that quite a bit in my videos too. I'd be like, holy hell, man, I'm getting hit, man, with some crazy feeling. And then the other videos, you'll see me. I'll be out there exploring. I gotta start finding structures. I gotta start finding some kind of evidence so I know where to look. Because I am an ex-tracker. I used to guide hunters and grizzly hunters and stuff like that, and I've learned how to track these Sasquatch and their weirdness. They have a habit of when they're walking through the woods, they have a habit of just snapping shit. And I figured out when I'm walking through the woods and I see a small sapling or a bush that's got a break, or the little sapling's kind of broke down this way, I figured out the direction that the sapling's pointed. Say it's busted and it's it's hanging down like this, like this. They're moving that way. They're not going that way.
Yeah, they're doing this.
They're just breaking shit as they move. They're always doing that, whacking shit. They're always breaking shit as they move, and that's their downfall when they're running around out there. Yeah, when they're walking, they're just constantly,
It reminds me somehow how gorillas also walk through the forest, or gorillas walk through the jungle. When they propel themselves forward, a gorilla will, and chimps will do it too, they'll grab the ground and they'll pull it backwards as they're throwing their legs forward. Now imagine Bigfoot doing that through a thicket, a thick forest, or, in my areas, I got saplings and thick saplings growing between deciduous, these huge oaks and hickories, and you'll see them the same way. You'll see on one side, it'll be snapped back with it like a check mark going down toward the ground this way, and then on the left, you'll see occasionally one or two more. And it's almost like they're grabbing and they're propelling themselves forward as they're snapping them. Yeah. And I always thought, and then when I had my friend tell me he actually witnessed one walking away. So he saw it, witnessed it, he was walking, and he says it was pissed. And I go, why do you say it was pissed? He says, as it was walking away, he said it was grabbing saplings and just snapping them as it was walking away, like it was like it had an attitude. And it was, and I said,
come
why do you?
across like that. Yeah, they come
Yeah,
across like but they really don't have an attitude. They have a, I get, because I've seen them do that walking through the forest where it looks like they've got an attitude, like they're just, ugh, I'm grumpy, I'm pissed off,
I'm pissed off, but that's just how
but they're
that's how they are.
they're really not. I think they just got a very display a complex about them that, hey, I'm the man, I'm the freaking
I'm the
man
man.
here, and
Yeah,
and the way they walk, they're just like badass,
it's
and
swagger. It's swagger. Yeah,
yeah, they're
they're
just
just like hell with them. Hell with I know what I'm doing. I don't. It's like
look
being
like McGregor
overconfident.
walking in the ring, when McGregor's walking in the ring, he's like, I'm badass, and I know it, and he's
Yes,
swinging, his
yes.
arms are out, and I
When I
just
was in
figured out,
when I was in Wisconsin, we had one come into camp right on the edge of camp, past the tree line, among these saplings, these small pine trees and fir trees that were sort of like intermingled with tall weeds. And it walked right into the edge of our camp, and we were all in our tents. And I felt I was asleep, and I woke up to uh, it as it was stomping away, snapping these trees. And I asked the other guys. There was 3 other guys with me, and we all had our own tent. We're all in our own tents. And they described. They says, "Well, it was walking away like it was pissed off we were there." And I go, "Why would you say that?" Because they're describing what they heard before I woke up. I just heard the tail end of the snapping and like the stomping, which it almost sounded like when it walked away, instead of slapping the ground with their hands, it was like stomping as it was walking away. So I heard the tail end of that. They heard all of it, from it roaring when it first got there. It stood there roaring, and like they thought it was either slapping its chest or slapping the ground, because it sounded like little earthquakes. And I said, and then later on, one of my fellow researchers, he goes, "It must have been pissed." And I go, "Why?" He says, "Well, the tail end of what you heard, we heard the whole beginning of that. When it walked away, when it turned to walk away, it started snapping as it was walking away, these saplings, just grabbing them and snapping them." And I go, "Why do you say that?" They said, "Well, that's what it sounded like." They didn't see it. They said it sounded like that. And then, of course, you could see the evidence, when you came out of your tent after everybody was afraid to come out of their tent. And I don't blame them. One of my friends said, when it was roaring, it stood there beyond the tree line, and there was 2, 3, 4, 4 tents, my tent and the other 3 tents. And he said it was roaring and thumping, whether it's chest or hitting the ground. And while this was all happening, I was sleeping. I didn't wake up until the tail end of it. And my friend Dave says, I started to unzip the tent flap. He says, and as I started to sort of push my head out, he says, I got just the top of my head out. And he says, it went from just roaring to just like, it went up like 100 decibels. It just like went and just started really. And he says, I said, what did you do? He says, I pulled my head back inside. He says, I slowly zipped it shut. And he says, it seemed like he did not want me to stick my head out and look at it. And it was like there, it was right there, like 35, 45 feet from our tent. And that previous night, before this thing made its entry at whatever, 4:30, 4:45 in the morning, there were little ones, I believe, little adolescents, little sub-adults running around in our among our tents, scratching on my friend's tent, taking their hands and raking it across the fabric on the tent like a person would do, doing all that kind of stuff. Walked up to my tent. I had a little small one-man alpine tent. So when you sleep in it, your left arm touches one wall and your right arm touches the other wall. That's how narrow it was. Well, I was laying on my side. It reached through the tent with its hand, and I was laying on my right side. It pushed me on my back and rolled me over on my stomach. And all I did, I had this expression on my face like, holy fuck. I didn't say anything. I was like, my jaw dropped. And then the next morning I shared it with the guys in camp, and one guy goes, yeah, he says, I had one like raking its hand across the fabric of my tent. And he goes, I know that wasn't anybody, because it was like pitch black out. There was, I think, cloud cover that night, and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So I was thinking, who's walking around in total darkness without a flashlight doing all this? So we knew the young one. So then the morning when we woke up, that's when this thing was there. I think it was like this property had been abandoned, and the woman that had lived there with her family had a lot of visits from Dogman, Bigfoot, and had seen them. And the property had laid vacant for years. And all of a sudden, 4 tents pop up in the backyard, surrounded by forest. And they were like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
What are you doing here? Yeah. And so it was very interesting. We saw a Dogman. One of those nights we were there, one of the guys saw a Dogman with his night vision. And then when he took the monocular away, he saw it with his eyes. He could see its mouth hanging open, an actual Dogman. And that was the reason we were there. There was a lot of Dogman activity at this place. We didn't really think we would encounter Bigfoot also, but apparently they're there also.
So, yeah, it's unusual. I've always heard that I personally know, I haven't experienced it. I've seen Dogman, of course I've seen many Sasquatch, but they say that those two don't get along, and others say that those two, they work together.
Yes, I think you can hold both thoughts in your mind that seem to be in disagreement at the same time. I think both is occurring. I think actually I've even decided 3 things are happening. I think in some cases there's a cooperation as far as hunting and gathering. I think in other cases they're like lions and hyenas. They hate each other. And I think in the third case, there's an indifference. We'll ignore you and let you do your thing as long as you ignore us and let us do our thing.
Yeah, so I think the Sasquatch are very territorial.
Yes.
They have these little areas, and a lot of people think that those X's are a warning to stay out. In a certain aspect, I could be wrong, but I think there are good Sasquatch and there are bad Sasquatch, and there's these like tribes of them. And I figured this out, like just up the road from me, about 5 miles. There's an area where there was a missing 411 case.
Oh, really?
And there's been a lot of people that went in there and never came out, or they found them dead. And every time I went up to that, and it's bordered by private property, I can't get access. And one of them's a church that owns most of that property and back into the area where I want to investigate. And every time I've just pulled up, I've gotten a couple of wood knocks. And I tell my wife, I said, every time we pull up onto the property and we get out just to look into the forest, you hear these wood knocks. They start wood knocking right away. But there's been a lot of deaths and different things in that area, and you don't see much for structures there. I've noticed when you're in an area where these bad Sasquatch, these more evil ones reside in their areas, because they have their little areas, you don't really see any structures. You might see a couple of breaks and a couple of trees that are peeled up towards the bottom or the top. Some people mistaken them as
or it's porcupines. And we also have bark beetles here, which also take the bark off trees, but you got to know what you're looking for, And
yeah, it's like obvious it's something did so. But then you get into an area where the Sasquatch are more peaceful, and when they interact with you, most of the time they're not real aggressive and violent, and they don't come across too mean about the situation to try, because they kind of don't want you there, I think,
yeah, they're not, I don't think they're there to be your friends, but they're there to like let you be. If you're hiking through there, they don't like, it's like they don't have to interact. I think they will knock to each other or let each other know that, hey, we got a human coming into our area. Just be aware. They're not there to run you off or be like, but I agree with you, because I think I've come to the decision or conclusion that they're a people, and just like us as people, as modern humans, you look at the spectrum of people that are from assholes to people that are just downright criminal and serial killers to people that are good natured and get along with everybody to people that are just like, I call it the old man syndrome, just, slow down, you're speeding past my house, shaking their fist. They're like, they're not trying to hurt anybody, but they're tired of people doing bad things. And so people in the neighborhood think, oh, that's old man so-and-so. He's a pain in the ass to everybody. He's an equal opportunity asshole.
Yeah.
But
it's funny. I'll get into their little areas. There's a lot of structure. Like I said, these good Sasquatch, they seem to have, first of all, it starts with the X's, and sometimes a lot of X's. Like it's a land of X's.
Land of X's.
And then you start, and the X's too come in many different ways. There's a top end X.
Yes.
There's that mid X.
Mid X. Yes.
And then there's the bottom section X. And then within those X's, they'll either lay a tree right here, here, or run up through the bottom.
Yes.
And that's
to me, that's a stick language going on there, because I've seen much the same. I have an area I was at yesterday where I walk in, and above the trail, and it's not a deer trail, because deer trails through this area I go in are very narrow, and you have to, you can walk them. They're just very difficult because they're such narrow trails. And you can tell the turf is sort of dug up from the hooves of the deer. No, these are like walked trails into thick thickets and weed thickets and impenetrable thick deciduous forests with saplings growing everywhere. And you can walk in and it's all trampled down, very flat. And you'll have at this one trail that it has a top crossing X, where the top branches, these branches were taken off of a wood pile that the DNR cut down by the parking lot, and they went and they got these, because they'll use whatever wood's available. They're opportunists. And they took these branches and they crossed them over the top of the trail where only the very top of the two branches are crossing. So it looks like an arch. And then they have others that are crossed in the middle. We'll have a third stick laid up in the middle. And then I've seen the ones that are crossed on the bottom, and they're really wide. They're almost like this. And you're going, and you'll be on the sides of hill. And I have one area, I went by, and I brought Becky down there, my wife, and I says, I'm going to name as you go by this hill, and this hill goes along the edge of a creek. And as you look at the hill, 1, 2, 3, I lost count. All these arches, all bent the same way, different size arches. Some will have a stick leaning up in the middle of the arch, which is like the classic one, and some will have no sticks leaned up. And I named it Arch Hill. I said, this is Arch Hill.
Are they pointing towards water?
Yes, the river.
Yeah, I've noticed the arches are always pointing.
All the arches are pointing toward the water. And some of the arches, in some areas I've been, a different area I've been, I've seen an arch where it was really cool. I have it in one of my videos. I have one arch and then a little bigger arch. And then right behind the bigger arch is a tree that's broken down and pointing the same way as the top of the arches. So you have what I call a triple confirmation. You have the two arches, both arches are pinned with deadfall, whatever they dragged over to pin them down. And then the third thing is this big giant tree that was alive at the time. It's probably dead now, and they went up 8 feet, snapped it over. It's probably 6 to 8 inches in diameter, and they snapped it up. So I took a picture, sort of a scenic picture, where you see the arch, the second arch, and then the broken over tree behind it. And they're all pointing the same way, and it's not toward the river. It's pointing east. Yeah. And I've walked that direction, and it directed me right to other structures that were waiting. Some were half teepees, some were X's, and the X's are all different, like you said. And I've come to the conclusion they have a stick language, at least the ones that are, you see a multitude of these structures are, it's a stick language. And when I've been in these areas, I don't feel like, it's not like I'm not welcome. I don't feel like I shouldn't be there. I don't feel like I'm not welcome. I feel like I'm just there, and they don't care if I'm there, and there's like an indifference going on. But if I'm in an area, like you said, where I see hardly any structure, I might come across maybe one X or maybe one pinned arch, and that's it.
Yeah.
I always wonder about that. I haven't made the connection that maybe I shouldn't be there, but maybe I've had that feeling, and I've just sort of, you know, made a mental note of it. But I've even seen the arches where they take the end of a 35 to 40 foot tall tree and they bent it over, it's flexible, and they stabbed it into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and but I've gone to the, I found some where if I take whatever's got it pinned down, a log, a dead tree or whatever, and it's just fresh, if I start to remove it, it wants to go back, it wants to spring back to its original position. But a lot of the ones I find, I'll come back, I'll see it's pinned down, and I'll come back later and they've removed that log or removed whatever was pinning it down, and it's still, it stayed like that.
Yeah.
Because it's been like that for, you know, years. So, and the tree's alive. All the branches are growing up vertically out of the arch.
Yeah.
And so I find a lot of weird stuff like that. And I'm like, some of the arches are so old that the bark is gone off them and they're just shaped that way. And if you go over and shake them, they'll break. But they've been that way for probably decades.
Yeah, it's strange. I've I don't know, a lot of my videos you'll see I'll revisit areas where there was these structures. Sometimes the structure is completely ripped down or it's partially ripped down from when I was last there.
Yes, I get that too.
And I wonder, like, why are you doing that? You know, why are you ripping that structure down after I just visited there maybe 5 months ago? I try not to visit the same area over and over and over. I mean, I'll visit it. I'll wait up to a month, sometimes 2 months, sometimes once a summer, and I'll go and I'll check it out. I feel like I'm stressing them out. So I'll just go in there like one time, see what's going on. And if it's a new spot, I'll go in there and okay, cool. I'll document this as a good area. And then I probably won't visit it again until like next summer. And then I'll walk in there and then some of the structures that I was looking at are either knocked down, they're not there. Some of the bends are no longer being held down. They're half up now because they're halfway shaped. You know, they're not like this anymore. They just kind of stay like that.
Yeah, they're unpinned.
Out, and I'm like, oh my God, they took that bend out of there. You know, they removed the log or they pulled it back out of the ground.
Yeah.
And then you got your leaners. You know, sometimes there's these perfect white old trees that are lifted up, leaned up on a live tree up on the limbs. And it's 2 to 3s are always leaning up, and usually they're pointing east. And then I'll come back. That's laying on the ground. This one's still up.
Yeah, I've run across that too, and I don't understand. You know, I've come to my, you know, opinions. That's all they are. They're opinions, and they don't hold water. You know, there's no evidence to back up these opinions, but they're just my thoughts, thinking out loud. And I'm thinking, in some instances, am I visiting these structures too much? And they're irritated, so then they destroy the structure, or like you said, they take part of it down. Because
I feel the same. Yeah.
You're coming back, you're agitating us, we're just gonna destroy part of it, or maybe take the whole thing down. And then there's other times I'll go back and like in one particular instance, I found this huge, just 2 giant trees that had been uprooted, and the root balls were still attached, and the trees were probably I'd say one had to be 16 to 18 inches in diameter, and the other tree was probably 14 inches in diameter. One was a double tree and one was a single tree, and they were crossed, and they were huge. Root ball attached. You could see the divot under both of them where they had like been uprooted out of the ground. You could see the divot where the root ball was, and they were leaned up like this, 2 giant ones. So I decided, what a better spot than to drop off some of my gemstones. I didn't leave any food gifts. I just brought, I said, I know they like, I've heard
That
people
idea.
they like quartz and they like, you know, minerals or different kinds of, so I had a lodestone full of fool's gold, and I had some quartz, some rose quartz, and I had a couple fossil rocks, and I sort of put them at the base of one of these trees above the root ball. And I would come back about once every week and a half. So I was coming back about twice to 3 times a month just to check on progress. And they would take the quartz, they would take the fossil rocks. I left a blue smiley face, like a giant poker chip that was blue, and it had a blue smiley face on it. And I brought that there and put it where those gemstones. And every time I come back, some of that stuff was missing, and didn't know where it went. And one time I brought a balloon, one of these Mylar balloons. It was a happy birthday balloon in the color they like, which was blue. They claim they like blue for whatever reason. I figured I'll go with it, see if it works. And so I took the ribbon that was tied to the balloon, and I wrapped the ribbon around a spot above on the tree, on this this double tree with the other tree going across it. I reached up and I tied the ribbon, and you know, so the balloon had whatever helium in it. It was there. You could see it probably from a distance. And then below it, I had, like I said, these rocks, these gemstones below it. I came back about a couple weeks later, and the balloon was taken down, and the ribbon was removed. It was snapped right where it was tied. It was like broken off, and that ribbon was gone. There was probably a 3-foot long ribbon on there. It's gone, probably longer than that. I want to say 5 or 6 feet long. And the balloon was put on the ground, the Mylar balloon, and it looked like something took its hand and pressed down and flattened this. It was a balloon shaped like a heart, and flattened it. And it was laying on the ground next to the root ball where I had all these rocks. And I'm looking for the blue poker chip with the smiley face on it, and I couldn't find it. So I'm filming it. I go, oh, look at the balloon. And I lift the balloon up off the ground, and what's underneath it is the blue poker chip hidden.
Oh,
and so it was almost like they were like playing games, like, yes, we're watching you and we're hiding. It was almost like, yeah, I'm smiling because I can see you, but you can't see me. Well, that was the impression I was getting. Like, yeah. It was like their representation of hide and seek. But yet they took the poker chip with the smiley face, hid it underneath the balloon, and smashed the balloon down and pushed all the air out of it. Yeah. And when I found it, I was like, well, that's unusual. You know, yeah. I mean, the first thing that occurred to me is I have a friend that's into all these serial killings, and he always talks about the smiley face killer. And I'm thinking, you know, I let that into my consciousness, and I'm thinking, man, I shouldn't be thinking about this. I'm in the middle of nowhere. But I think I thought it was Bigfoot related. I can't explain it. So then after that happened, I let it, I felt, you know, I'm not going to come back. I think I'm going there too much. I was going there 2 to 3 times a month. So 6 months, 8 months went by, probably even longer than that. I decided to return. I came back. The double tree that was crossed with the giant single tree, the double tree was pushed down. It was laying on the ground. The big one was still up. The other one was still up. And I thought, wow, was that because of me? Because I broke off the interaction, or was it because I was just going there too much? See, I'll never know. I'll never know.
I don't know what's going on in their heads. What are they thinking, you know? But
yeah, I mean, it's just behavior, and you're sort of studying their behavior and trying to get an understanding of what they're trying to get across to us, or at least to each other. What's their communication with each other, let alone what are they trying to let us know? Because I think the stick language is for them. At least that's my conclusion, is for them.
Yeah.
And we're just opining on a language we know nothing about. It's a symbol language. Just all the variations of X's, you know, described, that says there's something more going on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of X's up here, and there's areas that I could walk miles and drive miles, and I don't see so much as a break. I don't see nothing, and then all of a sudden, boom! There's a spot. There's X, and the X is the way they're built. The same characteristics as the same as you find them in the north right here, all the way to the south. I mean, shit, all the way up, all the way over in Australia. The same characteristics how they built. Like the top part's always on this side, and the bottom part's always on this side of the live tree. It's that same characteristics. And then they go off, and sometimes the X just by itself. All these different type of X's with these certain logs. Sometimes they'll have a log on each side in this part of the X, and then sometimes there's nothing. It's just an array of things. And
I've even seen live trees that still have roots in the ground, two like lodgepole type pine trees, where they're living, and they're bent across each other, and they're both still rooted in the ground, and they're sort of bent just above the root ball. They're bent, and they're still alive, and they're crossed. And the day before, that was not there. It was after some of our guys arrived. They said, we were just in this area. Now there's a big X there. They took two pine trees and crossed them. I've even seen freestanding X. You mentioned that a second ago, where usually when I see X's, they're wedged between, the bottoms of the X's are wedged between trees. One's behind a tree, one's in front of a tree, and they're sort of wedged in there. So they're locked into position. I've seen where they've been stabbed into the ground, and they cross, and they leave a partial branch on one of the X's that acts like a Y, and they capture the crossing, tree or limb in it. So it's like this and crossed like that. And you'll come across that, and that's giving it that stability. But then you look at the base, and the base is like the bases of these whatever trees or logs that they drag there are jammed into the ground. So with enough force, you can push it over. And I've seen that, and I don't see those a lot. That's very unusual. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what they're trying, what the communication's about, but there's a tribe in Indonesia, a tribe of indigenous people called the Penan, P-E-N-A-N, and they use stick language, and they've been using stick language for hundreds of years. And they have stuff like a hunting party of 3 want members of their hunting party that are further back to join them, and they'll leave 3 sticks leaned on a down tree pointing in the direction they are, and then 1 stick crossing the 3rd stick indicates they have a place to stay where they set up camp. And where that stick is placed on the 3rd stick tells them how far along it is, like 2 days, 3 days journey. So if it's on the bottom third of the stick, it's 1 day's journey from where it's a language. The Penan use it. And I'm thinking, well, the Bigfoot have apparently some kind of stick language going on too.
I figure out what the hell it means.
Yeah, figuring out how to decipher it until, you need to, maybe that'll come in the future. So somebody will teach them.
Oh, another thing that they do too with X's, they'll make up to 3 X's or so off of a single grouping of trees. Like, they'll come up, they'll make an X, another X will be here, then they'll make another X here, all intertwined and touching each other. But when you look, you're like, holy shit, there's 3 or 4. I've actually got video of it. I don't know if you've seen the video.
I think I've seen other people show that. I don't know. I might have seen it on your channel too. I've come across it also where I'll see an X like this, where it's wedged between, they have a tree on this side, a tree on this side, and the X is wedged in there, the bottoms of the X among these 2 trees. And then if you look to the bottom of the X, at the bottom of one leg will be another X there, and then there'll be another X on the other one. So you'll have 1, 2, 3 X's.
Yeah.
And what that, that's sort of mind boggling. But when I see that, it's always good to look in the surrounding area, not just at the 3 X's, but you'll notice like sometimes you'll have an X, and then further on, if you follow the direction that you're traveling that brought you to the X, you continue on, you'll find other things. And
Yeah.
that's not to say that I understand what they're trying to, whatever they're trying to say to their other members of their clan or your tribe, but it definitely is, until a Bigfoot or somebody, one of their people come forward and tell us or teach us what it is. I think it's all just speculation, and that doesn't really, it doesn't further it, other than the fact that you're trying to connect the dots and figure out how is this connected to behavior. And I feel, me too, when I'm in an area where there's a lot of structure, I don't feel bad. I feel like, hey, I don't feel like I shouldn't be there. When I come into an area, what I consider, I almost call it dead forest, where there's no activity, even devoid of other animals, birds, and squirrels, and there's no coyotes or anything. Those areas I'm a little more tentative about going into.
A lot of those areas up here.
A dead forest, yeah.
Yeah, it's just this dark, scary lodgepole pine, just sticks. As far as you can see, no foliage on the ground, and it just looks like if you walk in there, you just get reminded that something is going to reach out and twist you apart and throw you into pieces.
Yeah, listen, that's yeah. So
Lord of the Rings type shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It reminded me of it reminded me even of the dead forest in not just in LOR, Lord of the Rings, but there was in what was it, Wizard of Oz. They walked into the magical forest, or it was called I think the Dark Forest or something like that. But it was all the trees looked twisted and looked diseased. And the trees, we have forests like that in my area, where you walk in and you go, this forest it supports no wildlife. The trees you're afraid to touch them. They're like, a lot of them are, I call them hedge apple trees. They have these huge thorns sticking out of them. You're afraid to touch them, and they're growing everywhere. And it's like, you can't even walk through it. There's no way you can even walk through these forests without getting injured or hurt. And there's no undergrowth, no vegetation. And you don't hear any birds, coyotes, you hear no squirrels, no nothing. And I always thought, if I go in, am I getting out of here? Am I able to come out?
Tree comes alive and gulps you. You just never know, man.
Yeah, very strange. Yeah. So yeah. Anyhow, Zeus, I think, do you do any winter investigations? Do you ever go out during the cold months?
The winters up here? No.
Pretty crazy, huh?
Oh God. I mean, because I live at 8,000 feet.
Oh, then you wouldn't even be post holing. You'd be sinking up to your neck in snow.
Yeah, and the winds, 80-mile-an-hour plus winds. Oh, the winters are just god awful. I dread the winters up here. And wintertime comes along, I make no videos.
I don't either. I don't here, not because of that reason. Here it's because it's so extremely, it's that wet cold. Goes right through you. I don't care how many layers you got on. If you're out there in that kind of coldness, it's a matter of not even hours, minutes. You look in the mirror and you have icicles hanging from your beard and your mustache. Your eyelashes are frozen. Your eyes want to freeze shut on you. Your eyelashes become frozen and you can't open your eyes. So during the winter months, I really don't go out and do research.
No. And I think that the Sasquatch, they moved to their winter grounds. There's absolutely no sign during the winter. I mean, plus the snow's up to your chest,
Yeah. Same here. They moved to areas where they have a lot of deer and they could sustain themselves during the winter. And those are areas usually along the waterways and along the corridors of travel that usually you won't go because it's so cold or it's just impenetrable.
Oh yeah.
Because here it gets like it's sort of like North Dakota here in the winter in this part of Illinois. It gets that extreme when it gets down to like 0 or even 10 above 0. It gets that wet cold and it goes right through you.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to. I mean, you're basically surviving. So if you get out there and you get turned around, you're basically. And I've done a few winter uh, expeditions in the winter, and I don't do them anymore because I physically it's just too demanding.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm fair. Why put pressure on them when they're in survival, especially they're in survival mode during the winters?
Hmm.
So why put pressure on them? I usually more in the fall and spring, and even in summer, where they're struggling because of the heat. Why put pressure on them? So I don't do a lot in the summer either in the extreme heat. I leave them alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I know I got several different areas that I'll go check out, but then I leave it alone after that. And spring and fall is the that's the prime time if you want to catch something on video. They're
Right now,
moving around. Yeah, they're moving around. That's the
have
best
you
time.
have you ever had to worry about or be concerned about them showing up at your house, banging on your walls, or
No, uh, usually if you gift them food, which is a bad idea, I've always said it. Like, don't give them food. Give them toys, marbles, rocks, stuff like you
yeah,
gave them, ribbons, just stuff, toys. But I've had a lot of people that reported to me they didn't know what to do because Sasquatchers sound like they're coming through their their house, they're banging on the walls, they're raising hell. And I said, "Are you gifting them food?" "Oh yeah, we got a little area right out the back of the property, and we gift them food out there." And I'm like, "That's your problem. You can't be doing that. You can't give them food." A lot of people try to argue with me about this, but I'm 100%. I know I'm 100% correct on that. I was like, in the 34 years I've been doing this, you know what I've gifted them? I've gifted them. I'm guilty of gifting them food before. I gave a candy bar one time. I gave 2 apples. I gave a banana, and I gave a bag of crackers. That'd be about 5 items in 34 years. And I just don't do it. It's incredibly dangerous. You don't know what they're thinking, and it's
yeah.
kind of the same thing as a bear. You start feeding the bear out your front porch. He's going to come knocking your damn door down. He's getting aggressive with you. He's wanting more of it, you know.
I think
And I
there's an.
told,
I think you're right. There's an expectation, even if it's not near your house or your property. If you're doing it, I had a gifting site that's like 25 miles from my house, and for years I was leaving, like you said, I was leaving marbles, uh, little gemstones,
and that
things
kind
that
of thing is
anything they
fine.
couldn't eat, poker
Hmm.
chips, things that they couldn't eat, balloons. But a few years back, I decided I'm going to try the food thing just to see, just to experiment to get it off the table. So I got a bag of apples, big bag of apples, organic apples. Apples grow all over this area too. We have wild apple trees growing in our forest. So I thought apples, that's they have access to apples, wild grapes. So I got apples. Uh, I had a couple plastic containers, one of blueberries, one of blackberries. Blueberries and apples grow in our areas. Excuse me, blackberries and apples grow in our areas. Blueberries don't. You'll find blueberries up in Wisconsin, north of us. So I put a couple of those containers of the berries, and I had a bag of apples. And I thought I'd throw a jar of peanut butter in the mix. So I went to this hollow stump in my area, about 25, 20 miles, 23 miles from where I live. And it's an area where I've had activity, where I've seen their structures, and it's right above the edge of a creek bed. And I put it inside the stump and left. Didn't stick around. Came back about a week and a half. No, not even. Probably about a week later, and it was all gone. The bag, the container with the apples, the bag with the apples, the store bought bag, that was gone. The 2 plastic containers with the berries in them, they were gone. The jar of peanut butter, I had taken the cap off, peeled off the tamper evident aluminum foil, and sort of loosely screwed the lid back down. The whole jar was gone. The flowers I put in there were broken over. They were just basically pulled up, broken over, and thrown back inside the bottom of the stump. Like, we don't care about the flowers. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I came back a few days after that, and I dropped off 2 bags of apples inside the stump and a jar of peanut butter. And I noticed not near the stump, on the base of the stump, what was left of the along the edge of the stump where it was growing out of the ground, there was a lot of grass and vegetation was gone. It was just dirt at the drainage side, or the downside of the stump going into the creek. I noticed all the divots there. It wasn't clear footprints. It would look like they were having a stomp fest, the Bigfoot. So I took note of that, and I said, yeah, apparently they were here. So I left that off. I came back a few weeks later, was going to go down and check to see if all that was gone, the peanut butter and the 2 bags of apples. I never got very far. I got about not even 30 yards from my car. And the next thing I know, I was flanked. I heard they were down there on the right side where the stump was off the trail, walking in the creek bed. I could hear them walking. And while I was watching that, I could hear movement behind myself on my left as they were walking on the other side of me. So I thought, oh, they're expecting me. And I left. I said, this can go south pretty quick, because I had nothing with me.
Yeah.
You know, I thought the least that would happen is I get slapped around, they run over me and just knock me to the ground, or, you know, slap me around a little, bash, you know, step on me or whatever, and leave. Or the worst is they're pissed off, and I end up losing an eyeball, or, you know, get my arm ripped off, whatever. And I thought, well, that's not good. So I left, and I got the cojones to come back. I let it rest for about a month, knowing that they sort of come through this area it's like a cycle. They'll disappear for a few weeks, 3-4 weeks, and then they'll come back on the 5th week. And I sort of figured out their sort of cycle. And I thought, well, I'm going to come back when I know they're not there. And so I came back and got the feeling, the distinct sense, like I talked about with you earlier, that sense that nothing was there. They weren't there. When they're there, I have a feeling they're there. It wasn't like a heavy feeling, but it's like, yeah, I know they're here. So I walked in, went right down to that stump. All that stuff was gone. And then I said, okay, great. I confirmed that, and I left. After that, I realized I'm playing with fire. Do I really want to keep gifting them? Not that they're going to show up at my house, because you're talking about 25 miles. They'd have to come into my neighborhood among other houses to get to me. Not saying they couldn't, but at that point, yeah, right, exactly. So after that, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to gift them. I'm just going to leave, like you said, toys, things that they can't eat. That's how I want to develop an interaction.
Yeah.
So they can take those toys, give them to their kids can play with them, whatever. They're not going to depend on me for candy bars, peanut butter to supplement their diet. They already have a good diet out there. They don't need me to help feed them. I know people that would do that, and some of the people that are, I call them habituators, will feed them, will stop at McDonald's or Burger King and actually buy them meals and feed them in the field. And I thought, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's such a bad idea. I tell people over and over and over, I was like, a lot of people treat these Sasquatch like they're these kind, you know, will do anything for you. They are on a spiritual level, but not what you think sometimes. And I'm like, man, these things are of unknown origin, and you don't know what's going on up here. And they ain't that.
I almost say they're like, I almost try to equate them to a primitive human.
Yeah.
If you went back in a time machine and you tried to gift our primitive ancestors, who a lot of people like to call cavemen, I don't think it could end up well for you there either.
No.
Because the cavemen would have this expectation that you're feeding us, so now you need to feed us, and if you don't, there's going to be hell to pay.
Yeah, they kind of get up your ass, and that's what they want. They'll raise hell.
Yeah.
They'll slam 'em. You know, I've had a couple of I've seen one of my neighbor. She was a disbeliever, and she didn't tell me I was full of shit. And I said, well, you know, if you're gonna take anybody's word for it, they're out there. It's me. And she's seen one about 40 yards out in front of our place. And then one night I seen one, and he looked like a basketball player. He was real skinny, and he had a lot of long fur hanging off his hands. Everywhere else was kind of short. And I went out at night because, yes, I smoke cigarettes. You probably see that on the videos. And and I went out there with my wife, and we were sitting in the car. It was cool. I turned the car on, and the lights shined out into the forest and part of the meadow. And there's some houses up on the other side. There he goes. And I said, "Oh my God!" You know, and I made
Was this at your house?
Yeah, this is my house, just right here.
So,
I mean, out front, right here. And
so you had a neighbor habituating, potentially feeding one, and it was like just coming.
no, she didn't feed it. She wanted to start feeding it, and I told her, "Don't, absolutely not," because she didn't believe in Bigfoot until she seen one as she went out to her vehicle right over here to smoke at night. And I never told her what a Sasquatch sounds like, and she was mimicking what it was doing. There was 2 or 3 of them out here, but she said the one, you see like the house lights, and there's a couple of lights through the forest, and a few lights here, and it went up to the tree and leaned up against the tree and was looking at her like this, and it had dreadlocks all over it, very long hair, dreadlocks everywhere. And she said it took off, it jumped the neighbor's fence and ran into her property over there. And she said they were going whoop, whoop,
Yeah,
and I was just like,
I've heard that
no
before.
way.
I've heard that, the whoops before like that, and I always believe, as far as some of these like Bobo Fett type Bigfoot screams, people try to emulate that. They'll try to scream or do a Bigfoot vocalization. You don't know what you're saying to them.
It's a bad idea.
Yeah, it's bad. You don't know what you're saying to them. Are you saying, I just did something to your mother? Are you saying that, you're no good SOBs? Are you insulting them? You don't know. So why would you do that? I had a friend of mine, he did that, and he never do it again. He got surrounded. I said, how many? He said, I felt like I was at the zoo in the ape house, the primate house. And he said, I was surrounded by a bunch of chimpanzees. I go, how many did you estimate there were? He says, well, after I did the vocalization, he says, a friend of mine was with me and says, do one of your calls. So he did one of those, sort of like we've heard on Finding Bigfoot, one of those calls. And he says, the next thing he knows, he says, they're popping out from behind. He says, Don, I didn't see anything. I don't know where they came from. He says, they weren't there. He says, yeah, I was surrounded by trees, but I didn't see evidence that they were there. All of a sudden, they started popping out from behind these trees, going from tree to tree. He said he counted 8 to 9 of them, surrounded him on all 4 sides. He says he was surrounded at 360 degrees. He says they started going off, not just with whoops, but the chimpanzee, that kind of stuff. They were going nuts. He says the guy he was with started running back to their car, and he told them, don't run. And it was too late. The guy ran off, and he finally walked away. He says he wanted to stay, but he says common sense told him he just better leave. So he walked out of there, but he walked out of there with confidence. He said, I'm just going to walk out. I'm not going to run out, because he didn't want to trigger them running after him. But he said they followed him the whole way out with yeah. And I was with him one night. We were there, and we were just doing an overnight, and there was 3 of us. And just at sunset, it couldn't have been, the sun had just gone down. It was like that first hour after sunset where you sort of have a little light. It's not totally black.
Yeah.
And it sounded like 6 or 7 of them at least, all together in unison, were going, whoop, 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 whoop. It was like It reminded me of, if you ever go to a football game, at the beginning of the game, each side huddles together and they go, let's do one for the Gipper. And everybody does their signal, let's go win the game. And everybody like does their whoops, you know, a yell or whatever. It was almost like a football team breaking to go hunt. That's what it reminded me of. It was like, whoop, 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 let's go hunt. And then that night we had things happen where they were getting close. One came into our camp to check us out, see why we were there, crawled in on all fours, got within 30 to 35 feet of us, crawled in right at our 12 o'clock. We were sitting on the ground, me and another guy looking straight ahead. We saw this thing crawl right out of a ravine, past 2 trees, come right up on us. And I stood up and my friend stood up and he says, we see you. And I go, who is that? And it just went, it reverse crawled like a crab, crawled backwards, back into the ravine. Yeah, and we had our night vision. We had I had my thermal with me. I could see it with my eyes. I didn't need the thermal. I just saw this big black thing emerge and get bigger. It was crawling in to check us out. And it was like that night, like I said, I said, boy, I said, it sounds like they're getting ready for the hunt. When they did that, like, it reminded me of a football team huddled together and they all had their hands on top of each other going, let's win it for the Gipper. It was like, whoop, 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 whoop. And they all just like, and then they all dispersed and went hunting. And then that morning, right before sunup, we were camping near these tracks, these railroad tracks. And when I say camping, we cold camp. We had no fires because we wanted our eyes to adjust so we could see pretty good. Right at about 5:15, right before the sun, you could see the horizon starting to get sort of brighter. All of a sudden, this thing comes running down the tracks from, you could hear it from probably 500-600 yards away, and it kept getting closer. And I estimated every 25 to 30 seconds, it would let out a scream. And then it would get closer, and then 30 seconds after that scream, it'd let out another, like a scream howl. And then pretty soon it got just close where the tracks were closest to us. As it was passing, it let out one more scream, and then it continued down. And my conclusion, of course, is, again, it's a opinion, and I can't prove this. And I mentioned it to one of the guys I was camping with. I said, it sounds like he was calling for all the hunters, like, the hunt's over, come on back. That's the impression I get, like, let's gather back up. And it was running down the tracks, and I mean, it was going fast, and I could hear it. You'd hear this like howl scream, and then it would get 30 seconds, 25 seconds would go by, and you'd hear it again, only closer. And this happened at 25, 30-second intervals, and it passed us and continued down, and then it got fainter. And I was like, it wasn't a bird. It was like something we never heard before. It was a vocalization for sure.
Yeah.
So it was like the beginning of the hunt was started with these, like, a bunch of whoops in unison, probably within 100 yards from where we were camped. It was like just on the other side of the tracks in this huge forested area, a bunch of forested hills. So, you know, that was very unusual. And I never knew if that's part of their behavior. It's a behavior I've never heard before.
I've got some vocals like what you're talking about on video on my channel. Did you see that video? Sounds like a bunch of monkeys in the forest. They just start going off like what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was like, it was a bunch of whoops, like there was 8 to 10 together, and they all were going whoop, 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 all in unison, but they're all different. Some were high, some were low.
Was it similar to my video?
I'm gonna have to watch your video again. I don't know if I watched it, but I can tell you, if I watch it, it'll probably trigger that memory again.
It sounds just like what you're talking about. I've got it was almost at timberline, way the hell up here, and the area was crazy with huge boulders and rocks and whatnot. And I was walking on a trail, and there was nobody out there that day, and it was like 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was still light. And then I picked up on all that, and somebody tried to tell me, he's actually another researcher. He even said on his videos, referring to my video, that it was just these owls, and I was like, no, those weren't owls, bro. I mean, you compare that to a primate, put it under, they do the voice analysis and stuff, and you will find that it's not an owl, because I'm not an idiot when it comes to this
Right.
wildlife out here. I've been around it my whole life, and a lot of folks got to understand that. I don't film a squirrel and call it a little person, or hear
Yeah,
a squirrel.
if you drop it into Audacity, it'll show it's at a different hertz range than what an owl or any other animal, because
It was crazy.
their hertz range is, it's in a lower band of what I call, I guess you'd call it the megahertz range, or the hertz range. It's at a lower band, whereas coyotes and wolves are at a higher band. So you'll see the difference. So if you did an analysis of that, same with owls, their hertz range is totally different. They're in a hertz range where they have their vocalizations have a mixture of infrasound, which is low hertz, mixed with hertz of a higher range that we can hear. We're only hearing a part of that. We're not hearing the rest of that range, because we only hear down to, I believe it's no lower than 20 hertz, or down to 12 hertz maybe. But anything under 12 hertz down to 0 hertz, we can't pick up. We can't hear. So they're making this vocalization that the voice signature would show up on a graph as being out of our range of hearing, and that's probably what you heard was the upper end of those monkey sounds you're describing.
It sounded just like you were in a jungle with a bunch of monkeys out in the trees. It was no owls. I know what owls sound like. You don't hear a single owl that's ever sound like that in any of these woods. Your typical, they make a funny sound that will creep you out and make you think it's a cryptid. But I know exactly what it is. I mean, we're out here with the neighbors, and we had one of those making this. I can't even mimic it. Craziest damn sound. It sounded like some kind of creature sitting out there doing this call, and she was freaked out. She goes, "What in the F is that?" And I told her, I said, that's that owl. The owls make that kind of noise. I said, yeah. I said, watch, it'll mimic me. Ooh, ooh. And it goes, it makes this weird, reminds you of some ghostly creature, And
I think sometimes their impersonations or imitations aren't right on the money. I think sometimes they do that on purpose. I think other times they're just not. Some of them just aren't good at imitating owls or other animals, and so they're a little off. And you'll notice that you'll say, I know deer's grunt. I've heard deer grunts. Then I've heard other grunts, and we don't have wild hogs here in Illinois. We don't have feral hogs running everywhere, but you'll hear other grunts, and you're going, boy, that's not a deer grunt, unless that's like a 2,000-pound deer. There's no way that, so then I'll hear that, and I'm thinking, yeah, they're out there. I've even heard them moo like cows. And I had one that ran along the tree line on the opposite side of a creek, and it was running fast, and it was like I could hear it getting closer. Moo, 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 moo. And it went by, and I was like, there's no cows. There's no cows or cattle out here. And I'm thinking,
they'll mimic a dog too.
Yeah,
it sounds like a dog. Like the one video where you can hear it sound like a dog, and that's a video. That's the same video where you can see a Sasquatch run in the background just momentarily. You could see him run in the background. Somebody pointed that out. And that's when that was that day. I had all kinds of crazy activity, scary shit going. And I
have a video of that too, of where they were barking as I approached this area. While I'm in the area, they're barking like dogs, and even as I'm walking out, they're still barking. And I had one researcher friend of mine say, I even described it. I said, wow, I could hear people talking. And I said, then they must be walking their dog. It sounds like a big Malamute or German shepherd barking.
Yeah, it sounds
like a dog barking. The human vocalizations, where it sounded like people talking, that disappeared. And I could hear the various, I guess you'd call it, various loudnesses of the barking. Some of the barking would be sort of suppressed. Some of the barking would be unrestrained and louder. And then I started hearing a mixture, occasionally, of those owl hoots thrown in there with the dog barking. And then I I surprised something in there. It was one of my earlier videos from 5 years ago. I actually found prints where I actually jumped this thing out of its where it was hiding. I guess I got close and I heard a big thump like it jumped out of hiding, went above me, above the ridge line, and above that ridge line there was a two-way for four-wheelers, and it stepped into some mud and left 6 or 7 impressions. And the foot was no bigger than mine, maybe a little bigger than mine, 9.5 inches from toe to heel, but it had long friggin' toes. All the toes were really long. And later on, a friend of mine says, you know, those dogs and stuff you heard. I said, that was them. He says they were impersonating dogs. And I played that audio track from that video back repeatedly. And now I realize that was them barking. And then in my other videos where I hear dogs, I'll hear dogs in a distance. And then as they got closer, those barks changed to whoops. And in some cases, what it sounded like language, like guttural, like real guttural language. Like it was talking like it was just very deep, just doing that. And it was like saying words that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
So I came to the conclusion that they're great mimics, and they mimic a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
I've heard just some strange stuff, and then wondering about what I heard in your video, some of the vocalizations that reminded me of, comparing it to my stuff, and I'm going, boy, that's them, and they're exhibiting the very similar, almost same behaviors. They're trying to fool us because if you hear people talking, you attribute it to modern people, modern human beings. Well, now when I'm in areas where I know there should be no people and I hear talking, and every now and then it's accompanied by dog barking, owl hoots, and then later on you'll hear like quiet whooping, like whoops. Then I realize, yeah, that's them. And the sign is everywhere, breaks, the structures are everywhere.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they mimic everything. Even they mimic fake fire pits. They mimic stuff that people build, and they'll mimic that out there in the forest, or they'll mimic it right at a campsite right next to the original fire pit or whatever it may be, and they'll mimic that. And a lot of people will come up and they think nothing of it when you're looking at something that a Sasquatch just put down on the ground mimicking. And a lot of people, if you aren't aware of it, you're gonna think nothing of it. You're just gonna either leave it there or just kick the rocks back.
Yeah, it's what do they call it? It's just it's a reason for people to excuse it and say, well, that's just Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts doing that, Cub Scouts. So therefore, it's
I've been accused of shit like that. A lot of people accuse me of different things, hoaxing, and I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's just like, man, you guys ain't seeing what I'm throwing out there. I don't know what's up. I mean, you could go look at those videos where there's a picture taken of a tree and just zoom in on a black spot and say, oh, that's a Sasquatch. It's like, come on, man.
I see a lot of that. That's unfortunate because it takes away from the serious researchers who actually have actual evidence to show.
Yeah.
And I have one of I didn't put it up on my channel because I figured I would be ridiculed, but I got an image of Dogman. And I showed it to a friend of mine I call him the Dogman specialist. He understanding there's no experts, but he knows a lot about their behaviors. And he says, yeah, he says they come in all shapes and sizes, Dogman, just like Bigfoot. He says, in that particular one, he had a forehead, very big forehead like a pit bull does, and had his erect ears. And I was zooming and taking video while I was on Zoom. I was zooming my probably at the 150 to out to almost over 300 yards away. I was zooming in, and I didn't know what I captured till I brought it home and put it on my computer and put it on the big screen, and I realized, well, I went ahead and I opened it up, and there was 5 or 6 frames of this Dogman's head right above some foliage behind a tree, looking up over it, and there were some sticks crossing, one stick crossing in front of its face. It had the two eyes, the snout, the ears, and I showed it to a friend of mine. He goes, yeah, he says they come in. There's ones that have heads like foxes, some like German shepherds or wolves. Some have a head like this. It's a pit bull head.
Like a corgi. I've seen a Dogman that had a head that looked a lot like my little corgi, except
Yeah.
the ears were more pointed, but it looked like a corgi's face. It really did.
Yeah, I didn't realize he came in. He says, yeah, he says, look at domestic dog breeds, the variety.
Mm-hmm.
He says, they come in all different shapes and sizes. He says, there's one, a smaller dog man, they refer to as the foxman. That's a term that has been used. He says it's a smaller, they don't get much taller than 5 to maybe 5.5 feet tall. He says their face is more fox-like, but he says then there's the bigger ones. This one was, it didn't give me the creeps. It reminded me no different if I would have zoomed in and caught a wolf looking back at me through the brush from 200 or 300 yards away. That's what it reminded. When I went ahead and enlarged it and I saw this, and I said, man, if I put this on my channel, you know, all the attacks are going to begin. And, you know, and it wasn't pareidolia. It was pretty clear to see what it was. And I was like, how do I explain that?
Yeah.
Just, you know, it's an afterthought. I'm glad I got it because now I know it's in an area where I only thought Bigfoot were in. And my friend says, yeah, he says, usually, he says, if there's a Bigfoot in an area, there'll be dogmen there too, or vice versa. If you have dogmen in an area, he says, you also have Bigfoot activity also. So he says, you can't sort of don't have one without the other, regardless of how they act toward each other.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they respect each other's cycle. When a group is in that area, the other group isn't in there. And then when that group leaves, the other group comes in. Maybe they're doing something of that nature. I really don't know.
Yeah. I haven't seen any dogmen up here. I haven't even seen any evidence. I don't know a hell of a lot about dogmen. I haven't seen enough. I know a lot about Squatch, but I think up here at Kruger area, I think I found a dogman print. It's just nothing else that could have been. It was one print. It was a canine footprint. It was this big around, and I don't know if I still have a picture of it or not, but it was right.
That almost seems too big to be a wolf.
That
almost seems too big to be a wolf.
It was the biggest damn canine print I've ever seen, and I was like, "That's not a wolf." I mean, we've got wolves right up here. But that is far. I've seen their footprint before, and you know their footprints are, you know, like this. Yeah. This thing is like this, and there was only time, and I'd gotten a report.
Either you got a mega wolf or you got a cryptid, a dogman cryptid there. But I have casted some dogman prints in my area. I have. I don't know if you saw my video where I casted dogman prints.
I don't think I've seen that. Maybe I have.
Yeah, I did that. I think it was a year and a half ago. But I casted. I got a lead from somebody, and my friend called me and said she took a picture of a canine print she can't understand. It was pretty long. It was long this way, but it wasn't as wide from left to right this way. But it had a weird looking heel impression in the back, which you wouldn't dogs, canine, foxes.
It had
it's called the dermal.
It had 5 toes.
It had 5 toes. The thumb part was smaller, really small, but you could see it. And then in the back, it had what I call a dermal. It's a dermal or a carpal. It's called a carpal impression. And if you look at a cat or a dog, they have it. It's further up on their forearm, but this was down here, right behind the pad. So it made it look like a heel. It's called a carpal pad. I didn't know what I was looking at. I casted it. My friend says, yeah, he says, those are a smaller dogman. It's just not a full adult grown dogman, but it isn't. It's walking bipedally on its rear legs. And then I took pictures of some smaller ones, which were the toddlers, or what I would call the ones that just sort of old enough to start be able to walk on their 2 legs. But he said, yeah, he says he's had those impressions. He's found those impressions in other parts of the United States, I think potentially even in Wisconsin where he used to live. But he asked me, could you go down there? And he says, can you get some plaster of Paris and cast those? And I said, sure. So I can always show those to you. I actually, you can go to my channel. I did a video about, I just put unknown canine impressions. I didn't know what they were. I hate to use the word Dogman because it's sort of like, it's an expression that was created. You know, we don't know if it's part man, part dog. Is it a chimera of 3 or 4 different species mixed together? Is it, you know, part feline, part dog, part something else? See, nobody knows.
Yeah, that footprint that I told you, the big print, it had 6 toes on it. It had your main pad, and then it had
6 or 5?
Oh, I'm sorry, 5. It had five toes on it. And dogs only have 4, don't they?
Yeah, they only have 4, and then they have what they call the, it's usually removed, but the 5th digit is up on its forearm, way up here.
Okay.
And that's usually, some people take their dogs to their vets when they're real young and they cut that off. But it's a vestigial 5th. It's a thumb that was down here at one time, and then over, due to evolution, that little, it's called a dew claw, which is a vestigial 5th, or what we would call a thumb. But no, theirs is down here with their paw, which a wolf doesn't have. Doesn't have a 5th like thumb.
This one was down. I believe the extra digit was down on this side.
Yeah.
And it had the other dog-like digits, and then your main pad. And I thought that was weird too. And Kimmy pointed that out. She goes, "That thing's got 5 toes on it."
Yeah, yeah. Look at mine. My casts show a 5th digit, a thumb-like digit, and I think I did 3 casts, and shows the thumb-like digit, and it's there, but it's not. And what I didn't know at the time was that the front paws or hands, which are really bigger than their rear feet, or they're different, doesn't have that carpal pad, which looks like a heel. It looks like a really big, wide wolf print. So it looks like a wolf that's like the Mackenzie wolf, this giant wolf that lives up in the Yukon, in the Mackenzie Valley, River Valley area. It's like this wolf that's the size of a pony.
Oh shit!
Yeah, they still, I think they still exist, but they're a wolf population that was isolated in Mackenzie Valley that just got huge. But this is the front. What you described sounds like the front feet, or what I would call their hands, when they go on a quadrupedal and they're on all 4s. Their front. My friend showed me pictures of what their front impressions are like with the 5th digit, and it's basically what you just described. And they're almost bigger. Their rear feet are more see, I don't know much about Dogman other than what I've been sort of just starting out on, and I got enough on my plate with Bigfoot, to be honest with you.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I'll keep my eye out for him and some of the evidence. If I find it, I know, a little bit, but I know nothing about like those Dogmen. Like I had a report just down the road from me. I want to say about 10 miles. They're here. This girl and her girlfriend cruising down to her house, and it's just a little, if you blink, you'll miss this little town. It's just got a little pie shop. There's a few houses over here, and that's it. And there's a post office box. As you're cruising, there's a ravine, and they were cruising towards dusk, and it was huge. She said it come running out, forced them to come to almost a stop, and it stood up on its hind legs, and she was telling me, she goes, the way it was walking looked like it doesn't always walk like that, but it walked across the road on 2 legs, and she said it was like this dog looking, man type looking thing.
Yeah.
And she said the way she said it was up like this, and it was going, she was like this, it was like across the road, like it was having a hard time. And she said it went back down on all 4s, and she said it just smoked up that ravine. And she said what's messed up about it, her house is right up by that ravine. I guess they pulled up to the house, just parked right on the door so they can open their door, go straight into the house, and then
They
she,
were that scared,
yeah, and she had to tell me about it. She goes, "What in the hell was that?" And I'm like, "Sounds like maybe one of those Dogman dudes that people talk about."
My
And
friend, my friend who I do research with, I'll be down at his house pretty soon. He moved from Wisconsin to down by Kentucky, and he was surrounded by 4 or 5 of them in his yard when he lived in Wisconsin. And he described them. I said, "Do they have shoulders on the side like human beings? You know, when we walk, our shoulders are either laid back or they were just even with our chest." And he goes, "No." He says if you take a pit bull or a German Shepherd and you set them up on their haunches and sort of try to stand them up erect, he says their shoulders are forward. They're like right here, and their legs, their front paws are like this. He says if you lean them back, their shoulders will drop back a little. But he says when they walk characteristically like she just described to you.
yeah,
He says they don't walk like a man. He says they walk like they're more comfortable. They can walk as an adult easier on their hind legs than when they're younger, but he says they're more comfortable on all fours. But he says they can run on their hind legs just as fast, probably if not just as fast as they can on all fours. Once they start getting that motivation going and they start really getting some speed. If you ever see a kangaroo, running on its rear legs, of course they're hopping, but it reminds me of that one lizard. It's called the Jesus lizard. It runs across the water on its rear legs.
yeah,
I don't know if you ever seen that. They're from Australia, I think. But
yeah.
that's what he sort of, it reminded me based on that description. But he says, yeah, he says their shoulders are forward. They're not back like, I'm not saying there aren't some dog men that are genetically modified by the military that maybe have shoulders on their side and have legs like humans, but the ones he described have more of the dog-like hock, where it has that sort of reverse bend in their where their heel is. It's got that sort of bend. It's more of a rear dog leg as opposed to a human leg.
Yeah.
So, man, I don't know. I think we covered a lot of material here. I have a lot of stuff to upload. I think people will be interested in what you had to say. Do you have any closing things that you want to get out there for people that might be interested in your channel, people that might be interested in your evidence? Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I just want to tell the people, if you go subscribe to my channel, I try to educate people not to be scared of these creatures, but to be aware, be respectful, be more open-minded about the subject of Sasquatch and other things out there. Just, and my recommendation, just please don't feed them. Please don't feed them. If you can help it, don't vocalize at them. If you can help it, don't even wood knock at them. I've had bad things happen. Go out there, talk to them with your voice, even though that you don't see them, that they're there, but you don't see them.
Acknowledge them.
Talk to them, acknowledge them, and be sure and tell them they're not welcome to follow you home. You are you're just in the area. You want to learn more about them. You mean no harm, that you're a good human, and just go up in that aspect about it. As far as if you're going to vocalize with your own voice.
Don't try to imitate them or make sounds that you think they would make.
Bad idea, and people don't realize that how bad of an idea that is. And yeah, I am guilty of doing it a few times in my videos.
I have too.
If you watch my videos, I virtually never do it at all. I don't even wood knock, because there's reasons behind that. But just talk to them. Keep in mind, they're not a bundle of roses out there. They're not this little cute little puppy that'll come up and give them little kisses on the head. Keep in mind, man, these things, if you don't know what's going on up here, you really don't.
And you don't know if, based on previous interactions with people you never knew that were there before you, how that fared with them, and why they might have a hair trigger, because they've had it with people I mean, it wasn't too long ago I went to an area that I frequented, and I was met with a man walking out basically out of the trailhead toward his vehicle, turn around at the tree line and empty the clip. Just bam, 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 empty the entire clip as though he was pissed off for whatever reason. Maybe he got scared in there, something freaked him out, and he just emptied his clip, then came out of the tree line, and 10 feet from the tree line where his car was parked, got into, well, it was his truck, got in his truck and left. And I was going in there, that was one of my research areas. And I'm thinking, I at that point, I was like, well, I'm going to go home now because I don't know what happened there. And I'm just like, before I got there, was he already shooting at something while he was in there? Did he injure something? So I understand now why they have a hair trigger or why they might react that way. Like you said, you don't know what's going on upstairs or what they've encountered before you maybe interacted with them or ran into them. I always, another thing I want to ask you real quick on before we end this interview. I've heard both theories, probably several theories about the woodnocks. I don't envision them carrying a stick and hitting trees all the time. I don't think that happens. I think just like chimpanzees, they've seen chimpanzees beating on the trees, the base of trees with their feet, and it sounds just like a woodnock. I had a friend of mine tell me he witnessed that he or a friend of his witnessed one standing. There was two of them standing, and the one closest to the tree took its hand and hit the tree, and it sounded just like a woodnock. And now I'm hearing that more and more, and I'm almost sort of leaning this way, that I go into areas where there are no trees, or there's just a lot of small saplings, and it's just a prairie, and I'll hear woodnocks issue out of these areas. And I've come to the conclusion that if they have this ability to mimicking a woodnock would not be hard for them.
They'll do it with their mouth too, real hollow knock.
Yeah,
I don't know what they do with their finger, but
yes,
us, we go.
yeah, we do the pop, but I can imagine with their lung power. I even heard a person that I tried doing it, but where you can do a woodnock where you pop your hands together and it sounds just like a woodnock. But
yeah,
I think they're in air. I don't envision them carrying a stick with them everywhere, finding the perfect tree that has no bark on it. Because when people do woodnocks, you always hear that crunch. If you hit the tree the wrong way or you don't have the right stick, it's not really when I hear the woodnocks are too crisp and clear.
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion that very possibly it's a vocalization they're doing.
I know they'll use rocks too to woodnock.
Yeah.
They'll throw a rock at the perfect tree.
Into a woodnock.
Pop sound to it. You know what I mean?
I've heard also rock clacking.
Oh yeah.
In creeks. I'll go approach a creek, and I've heard rock clacking coming out of the creek where two rocks are being hit against each other, and that's an obvious sound. You can't mistake that. Yeah. But the woodnocks, like I said, I think they're doing both. I think they're hitting trees either with their hands or throwing a rock at them. But more often than not, I hear these perfect, crisp woodnocks, and I'm thinking, I just don't picture them running around like a caveman with a club hitting trees.
No, I've seen evidence of a tree getting smacked onto another tree, damage the tree and everything, but I think they've got an array of different ways. I think they do it with their hands.
Yeah.
Here, maybe even kick a log or stomp a log, or they're
popping their mouths or doing if you watch Kalahari Bushmen, they have a click pop language. Yeah, their language is mostly clicks and pops. The Kalahari Bushmen from Africa. When I saw that, and these are people that don't get much taller than like 4'7" to 5 foot. That's the tallest person in their ethnic group, and they do these mouth pops and clicks that are, when you hear them, you're going, that sounds mechanical. It's that good. So Bigfoot being really good mimics, yeah, I'm sure they'd have an array. I have one guy that tapes stuff here not far from where I live, down in Springfield. He has tapings of audio recordings of Bigfoot doing zippers, tent zippers and chainsaws.
So I've heard of that. I've
Yeah.
never personally heard it before, like with my own ears, but I've heard of that though, of how they'll, make chainsaw sounds and stuff, or
I've
the
heard,
car door close.
I've never heard it either. I've never heard, the tent zippers make sense because wherever there's a campground, you got people in tents. And so they probably hear the zipper sound all the time. So they probably, they have probably members of their family groups or clans that are probably really good at doing mimics, impersonating our voices. So I do what you recommend. I go in an area and I go, it's just me.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yep, just talk to them. That's all you need
Yeah.
to do. Is that most of the time they will understand you, and you just talk to them. I wouldn't, it's totally up to whoever views this if they want to would knock theirself or try that vocalization or gift them food. But just coming from a very experienced guy, I wouldn't go. It's just best to stay away from that aspect
Yeah.
of researching.
Well, that's safe and that's good advice. Well, Zeus, I'm going to drop the link to your YouTube channel, Project Sasquatch, in the description below this video, and let people know that to go watch your videos, your content going back several years, and definitely comment and hopefully subscribe, and maybe you'll get some commentary from people that you can take out, or at least meet, or at least to some degree they can understand, your research and the evidence that you bring to the table is something that you can go out and you can apply yourself to prove it to yourself. So I think I urge people to do that. So I want to thank you, Zeus, for this episode 4 of Unacknowledged and Unknown. I'm really not, I don't do podcasts, but I consider this more of a discussion as opposed to an interview. So I'm glad you're had the time to share with me, share with the viewers, and I welcome you back to come back again and maybe give us an update on your expeditions out into the field.
Yeah, that's if I go back out. I've been dealing with some pretty bad back problems. Kind of ruined my my summer towards the end. I want to try to get out a few more times before it gets too bad around here. But if not, I've got a lot of stuff to talk about. I got a lot of pictures and stuff like that, and don't forget my group, Project Sasquatch.
Yeah, so I also have Zeus has a Facebook group, which I was fortunate enough to join. Now they call it follow. It's no longer joining, you follow, but it's called Project Sasquatch. It's a Facebook group. You can get his videos, access to his videos through his Facebook group page, and you can also access all his images and pictures that he uploads there. So I just want to urge people that if they feel compelled, I only have serious researchers on. I only talk to people that are compelled to go out there and do the investigations in a serious and a factual way. It's not all about fear-mongering and the paranormal, as some videos or some people want you to believe. It's there is the common sense and logical approach to this. So I encourage people to pay Zeus a visit. Go to Project Sasquatch YouTube, type in Project Sasquatch, 2 separate words, and you can go to his Facebook group, also under the title Project Sasquatch. So I thank you again, Zeus, for spending some time with us.